Mention Don Quixote to a Clapham omnibus focus group, and, so long as it's not all millennials in earpods, the response will be, "Oh yeah, the one about the windmills." For such is the popular appreciation of El Quixote, my noble and complex hero, that he was a buffoon in not very good fancy dress, a delusional old gadger who strayed off his meds and got mixed up between windmills and evil giants. But in El Quixote's defence, at least he was never reduced to dunking soggy bread in his warm milk. No, right up till near the very end, he always managed to get back up on his horse. Robert H. Schuller's motivational fridge magnet comes to mind. Better to attempt to do something great and fail than to attempt to do nothing and succeed. Or perhaps Bertolt Brecht's is a better fit. Do not fear death so much, but rather the inadequate life. I admire the fact that this pensioner hidalgo had sufficient strength of will to render his obsessive reading of knight-errant literature into real-world adventures, even if the real in real world was frequently black hat hacked by the great deceiver, spinner of magical tricks and illusions. In my early sailing years, I too was the subject of magical tricks and illusions. Many times, for instance, sailing close-hauled out of Holyhead, thrashing our way through the overfalls of South Stack, I'd become bemused and somewhat frightened by the impression that we were making absolutely no progress at all. Ducking great explosions of green seawater breaking into the cockpit, I'd glance ashore and envy the dog strollers on the lighthouse path, moving faster than we ridiculous novice sailors. Lacking any mastery of the tides, I placed much of my faith in the old yarn that there is a guardian angel who looks after all yachtsmen in their first season. I was even almost able to convince myself and also my lady wife that this angel would remain vigilant, provided we carried on sailing through the winter, and thus never brought our first season to an end. Such was my arrogant assumption about the feasibility of scamming a guardian angel. Somewhere in his early adventuring, Quixote sees approaching a large and thick cloud of dust churned up, which, he believes, is a vast army composed of various and countless nations. He rushes to join battle and kills 7 sheep before the shepherds, slinging stones as big as his fist, manage to drive him off. One slingshot catches Quixote in the ribs, another breaks some teeth, another crushes his fingers. Later he concludes that his deceiver must have changed that vast army into a drove of sheep, a conjuring trick only possible because his ignoble squire, Sancho Panza, was susceptible to fear, and one of the effects of fear is the disorder of all our senses. Back one hazy afternoon in our novice sailing days, we had a very similar, almost military experience when we mistook the low-lying Skerries rock formations to the north of Holyhead Harbour for an American 6th Fleet battle group, consisting of a large carrier, the lighthouse, flanked by frigates and landing craft, all heading our way. Crash jibing, and only after that looking more closely at the chart and determining which way up was north, were we able to sail on, troubled only by the embarrassed realisation that out at sea we were pretty well afraid of everything. Another take on the deluded pensioner versus noble hero question is Eric Graff's view that Cervantes did not intend Don Quixote to be the model of anything more than an annoyingly aggressive and ethnocentric fool, a menace to society who acts out his dangerous infatuation with the laughably antiquated aristocratic ideology of chivalric romance. One or two of my own long-time sailing heroes now fail to shine in a similarly harsh spotlight of truth. Already disillusioned to have the dozen and more Tristan Jones books I once eagerly absorbed now exposed as mere yarns, potboiler fabrications, it hurts far more, after decades of genuine hero worship, to comprehend adventuring author H.W. Bill Tillman as a mean-spirited, unfeeling and unloving caricature of a human being. All of which leaves me wary of my delusion that all our adventures, all the stuff I made my lady wife go through, would make jolly fine reminiscence material come the time when we were too old to get back on our horses, too old for anything much more than gum slurping, the warm milk and the soggy bread. Perhaps the truth is that back in our early sailing days, if not a menace to society, I was surely a menace to the most loyal and reliable person with whom I'll ever sail. Perhaps we shall not, for instance, with any great fondness, reminisce about one winter night when the skerries came much closer to having a last laugh, as, anxious to force our way back south into the safety of Holyhead Harbour, we attempted to round Carmel Head in half a southwesterly gale. We spent hours gripped in yet another unfavourable spring tide, which constantly set us towards those rocks with their dreadful warning light. Exhausting ourselves, we tacked again and again, and again and again we saw ourselves still driven into danger. The crisis came when my lady wife, trying to rest down below, was ousted from her bunk by a low-level seep of sulphuric acid and chlorine gas fumes. Acid from our engine battery, a dodgy installation in the bilge, combining with seawater from a leaking prop shaft. Frightened by the leak, tired, wet, cold, longing for it to be over, eventually all we could do was cuddle together in the boat's cockpit and cry.